Way before The Witcher 3 found its way into my heart, before Vars lured me into the rabbit hole, there was a game that blew me away just as much as it scared me to death. Trapped in post-apocalyptic Russia with nothing but death and destruction around us, we find ourselves in the role of Artyom, a young inhabitant of the Moscow metro system, a last refuge for humanity from the contaminated world outside. When his big hero, Hunter, doesn't return from an important mission, it lies in Artyom's hands to save the world, or what's left of it. This world made me shiver while being wrapped in a warm blanket. It made me feel alone and desperate for human contact while I was sitting comfortably in my own bedroom. It showed me that horror is more than just gore and cheap jump scares. This world is the world of Metro 2033. Alright, comrades, get your bastard gun ready, check your filters and pack an extra pair of boots. This is your first expedition and one can never be careful enough. And now get it together, because we are going to the surface. To me, and just as a reminder, this is my personal opinion and I'm a huge wimp when it comes to scary games, a really terrifying game is not full of jump scares, gore and scary faces. It scares you through other means, 5 of which I'll tell you about in this video. First of all, Metro, and by the way, when I say Metro I mean both 2033 and Last Light, and maybe some lore from the books, has a big advantage at trying to make us feel uncomfortable. Because what the games display may very well be our own future. A childlike racist clown operating the red button in the White House. A crazy nuclear-armed dictator just above South Korea, and the whole world on the edge of lunacy are exactly the right ingredients to throw humanity down in the hell of atomic annihilation. And deep inside, we all know and fear that. And this is where Metro gets us before we even start the game. War, and nuclear war even more so, is the biggest universal fear that connects us all. Some are afraid of spiders, some are afraid of the dark, but everyone who is in their right mind should be afraid of war. In Metro, we don't get to see much of the war that led us to what we experience in the games, but by showing us how miserable and inhumane life, even for those who survived the last big war, is, it robs us of the tiny bit of hope that is left that maybe if we just get through this, life might be okay. But it won't. Metro is direct, it is harsh, it shows you what your life will become and you can't look away. People living in their own dirt, children asking their mother where father, oh father, has vanished, and whether that weird lump on mother's throat is the sickness everybody's afraid of. Deny it all you want, this is a realistic scenario for all of us. Maybe not with as many monstrous mutants and mystic occurrences, but with the same misery and fear. The kind of light-hearted and ridiculous atmosphere of Fallout 4, the fantasy setting of The Witcher, or the Michael Bay-esque over-the-top action of Call of Duty titles allows us to distance ourselves from what is happening in the games. But Metro's unforgiving image of our very much possible future allows for no distance. The world often still looks like it did before the devastating events of 2013 when the bombs fell. 20 years have passed, but the remnants of human society still decorate the face of the earth and remind us that this used to be our world. Even the monsters are mostly mutated versions of animals we all know, like dogs, bears, wolves or crows. They are not too far away from how we know them, and this makes them even more frightening. Or maybe they have always been there, waiting underground below the metro, and now that they will sense the weakness of us humans, they come out to hunt. I should probably mention right now, as I can already see the spare time Rambos rushing down to the comment section, that this is a very subjective way of looking at it. This whole video is very subjective actually. A big part of the experience of playing scary games is to be willing to immerse yourself into the game. Ridiculing situations and blatantly denying what you see and hear is a cheap way of demeaning a game, or even more importantly, preventing yourself from fully experiencing it. There was this girl back in school who told me that she was very much into horror games. I myself am a whiny little kid when it comes to horror games, and I asked her how she managed to play for a long time without her dying of a heart attack. We started to talk about Amnesia, one of my all-time please don't games, and she said that it's fairly easy if you just rush through the levels and ignore most of what's happening. And that is just stupid. If you play like this as well, don't be disappointed if a game does not scare you or drag you into its atmosphere as much as you'd like. You have to give it a chance to show you the scary things and the unnerving sounds. And this is what I did while playing Metro. I allowed the game to manipulate me, making me feel things that I shouldn't be feeling, and I shut myself off from the outside world and jumped right into this one. So it's completely okay for you to disagree with me. You might find the game not scary at all, more like a Call of Duty Underground edition. But I tried to be scared by it. And it worked. In this world, there are only a few places you could call safe. Everything is against you, and meeting friends and friendly NPCs after hours of being alone feels better than in most other games. You start off at a miserable but friendly and until recently peaceful station, the Exhibition, at Tom's home station. Attacks of a mysterious new enemy increased in the last weeks, and after your idle hunter doesn't return from an important mission, you are forced to finish what he started. Alone. In the tunnels. When the doors shut and darkness surrounds you, they awake. Marcellus' demon, biomass and lurker. There are very few safe zones outside the stations, almost nowhere to rest. Even with your back pushed against the wall, you can't be sure that there's nothing lurking in that air vent 3 feet above your head. You may think that due to Metro's mostly tube-like level structure, it was easy to develop and design, and I think that it's actually the other way around. Big open worlds offer a lot of ways to make your life as a video game developer easier, like vegetation brushes or auto-structuring of stones, roads or even villages. But when the player will probably see everything from a close distance all the time, you can't get away with cheap automatically generated areas. And Metro succeeds at delivering this world. The well-adjusted balance between narrow and dark tunnels and open stations or even the surface gives you a chance to breathe and relax, and it mostly times these relaxation areas quite well. It is debatable though if a subjectively too long of a stretch of narrow tunnels and service rooms was just designed too long, or if it serves a greater purpose like creating tension or stress. That's up for debate and neither an argument for the fans nor the critics. Even though devoid of most of Earth's life, Metro somehow is full of it. The stations obviously are packed with people who trade goods, play guitar, search for their loved ones or just chit-chat or sleep. But even the tunnels, as empty as they seem, are full of the invisible. It is interesting that you don't need to directly encounter the living things down there to feel their presence. Sometimes a creature just walks by a few meters ahead of you, or stares back at you when you glimpse down a small service corridor. And just knowing that it is there, somewhere in the dark, is definitely frightening enough. The surface, on the other hand, is a bit more on the nose with the presence of the living whatever. Howls, screams and sounds of creatures flying, crawling or running in the distance constantly inside your ears, and you just got used to their sounds being just background noise, and their cause comes crawling right at you. Apart from the mutants trying to eat your guts, the surface is really refreshing. In the books, Artyom always dreams of and longs for the surface. He's obsessed with finding a place to live, fresh air and clean water, but not underground. When you finally reach the surface, especially in 2033, you understand his longing. You are no longer confined by narrow walls, but presented with humanity's real home, their previous kingdom, so to speak. You see real houses, even though shattered to pieces, and even plants or bushes, even though only a skeleton of what they once were. But these skeletons, the empty window eyes of what once were homes to thousands of people, and the gnarled remains of trees are so familiar, so normal that they grant Artyom and the player a short glimpse into what was once everyday life. Metro is not only shadowy intensive stealth, it also has some serious gun action on the surface just as much as underground. Most of the time, the game provides areas large enough for firefights, but sometimes your space is so limited that any gun-driven fighting is just too chaotic. I tried to avoid any kind of fights as much as I could because I honestly think that Metro should not have as much action as it has. Don't get me wrong, these parts are fun and there need to be some firefights, especially when the game wants to stick close to the books. But I realized that Metro is at its best when you stay in the shadows. This may be the reason why people who rushed through the game guns blazing didn't enjoy it as much as I did, which again supports my claim about the style of playing and the quality of the atmosphere. The level design luckily supports stealthy gameplay a lot. There's always an air vent, a small drain pipe or some boxes to climb on and into. Oftentimes you can turn off the light either by screwing out light bulbs, flipping a switch, blowing out candles or just shooting the lamp. If you're lucky, this will attract an enemy that wants to check what happened to the light, pulling him away from the group. A quick knife to the back and your life just got a lot easier. Fresh air and ammunition are goods so rare in the Metro, they make up a big part of the atmosphere. When your filters get clogged up, a chum starts breathing louder and heavier, the watch on your wrist beeps and the glass on your gas mask begins to freeze and you know you need a filter, but you don't have one. And you can't find one. You try to remember when the last time was that you saw a merchant, you ask yourself why you didn't buy enough filters. Or did you? You don't have enough ammo either, so where did all the money go? And before you even finish thinking this, a demon already caught you in its big eyes, and you realize that you will probably die. In the end, as always, it is completely subjective how you perceive and if you even like this world. For me, it led to constant stress and the feeling of always being watched, but not in a bad way. Many games stress you by constantly attacking you with noise and images, enemies and events. Metro often stresses you doing the opposite. It gives you silence, darkness when underground, almost like a sensory deprivation, only to strike with full force when you least expect it. This effect completely vanishes when you don't play Metro the right way, big quotation marks. Rushing from one fight to the next, from one goal to another, never gives you a chance to experience the darkness and loneliness. Speaking of loneliness, I can't really explain what this isolation or loneliness is and why I feel it, but it was the main reason why I started producing this video. When I play Metro, not always, but in many parts of the game, I am immersed so far into it that I feel the desperation, the loneliness that Artyom must feel in that moment. I don't think I am him, I'm not imagining some kind of roleplay, but through, I would say, empathy, some of his emotions, or at least what I think he is feeling in this situation, drips into my mind. In most games, I am a bystander, I'm watching what is happening, I get happy and I get sad. But in Metro, I feel connected, probably because Artyom, just as so many other protagonists, is mute. Replaying the game for this video, I noticed something weird. In my memory, Metro 2033 and Last Light are stuffed with levels where you're completely isolated in the dark tunnels and corridors of the Metro, or even the surface. But when I specifically searched for parts like that, skipping through the chapters, I struggled to find fitting situations to show the loneliness. This can mean two things. Either I'm not patient enough to play the chapters long enough to encounter these parts, or when I played it for the first time, and the second time, the parts where I really was alone left such an impression that I remembered them as being everywhere. Since I got Metro 2033 as a free game, much has changed. I played both games I think twice, bought almost all books available in German and plowed through them like a maniac and fell in love with this idea of post-apocalyptic life. Places like Chernobyl and games like Fallout, Metro or Stalker fascinate me, and I guess that this fascination is a big part of why I love Metro so much and why I get immersed into the game so easily. Again, this is a very subjective point of view, and I guess not even half as many people will agree with me as did on the Witcher video, but that's okay, I just wanted to tell you what this game can do. Oftentimes Metro overdoes it a bit and drifts too far into typical shooter gameplay. It is still a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but the fighting mechanics are definitely not top notch, and the contrast between the firefights and the dark tunnels or abandoned back alleys of destroyed apartment buildings is just too strong, and it kills the loneliness. A few times the game even sneaks a very cheap kill enemies and wait for blah 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 to arrive situation into the story, and that is highly annoying. Stalking, hiding in the shadows, and being all by myself are definitely the stronger aspects of Metro in my opinion, and a big part of the loneliness. Even though it follows a very linear story and gameplay which usually hinders mechanics like that. But then again, what do you expect from a game set in tunnels? I have to admit, I'm a sucker for game soundtracks. I spent a lot of time talking about it in my Witcher video and I had nothing to complain, even though I bet that there is something wrong with it. In Metro, more than half of the atmosphere is created by the soundtrack. Piano, guitar and string section pieces are most common and paired with a lot of deep bassy sounds and drums. Upbeat and almost happy songs are also present and used at the right moment, but the creepy pieces are the real deal here. Besides the obvious leap in quality between 2033's and Last Light's soundtrack, depending on what they are used for, some pieces are produced a bit differently than others. Some of the music is pretty basic in its production, not perfect mastered or absolutely noise-free recordings are present, but that was definitely done on purpose. Especially the solo guitar tracks sound like an amateur recording when you hear them in the game. For example, when citizens of a station sit around a campfire and listen to some guy playing them on his old guitar. They feel natural in this environment. The not polished mixing and not perfectness of the pieces reflects the world they are presented in. Spectacular and important moments of the story, on the other hand, are accompanied by marvelous, high-quality pieces that carry the euphoria of the situation just as well as their smaller brothers and sisters carry the horror of their respective situations. Let's listen to one example for each of those two types, so you can see the difference between the high quality and well-produced songs and the more amateur-like.
And look forward. A battle raged here long ago. The defenders still man their stations. Follow me, but remain at my back.
To be honest, I really don't know if this video is what I wanted it to be. After the great feedback I got from my Witcher video, I felt confirmed in my idea of producing more reviews or analysis on my favorite games, and Metro follows The Witcher 3 very closely. But I still feel like I'm missing something about Metro, like I can't put my finger on it and say, yes, this is what I wanted to tell my viewers about, this is what amazed me about Metro. Or maybe this ambiguity is exactly the point. Maybe Metro left such a mark in my mind that I'm still overwhelmed by its atmosphere and story, leaving me unable to define that feeling and to tell you about it. I'd like Metro to be this kind of a game, to be this strong and well made. And maybe it is, for me it is. Or maybe it isn't. The easiest way for you to find out is just play it yourself. And if you want to, there's only one more thing to say. Get your bastard gun ready, check your filters and pack an extra pair of boots. This is your first expedition, and one can never be careful enough. And now get it together, because we are going to the surface.